how you and I can develop authentic relationships as we walk this earth together. It's one of the most important topics that we could possibly ever talk about. So I want to start out by reading to you a speech. This is probably the most famous baseball speech ever. It was delivered by Lou Gehrig after he realized he had been diagnosed with what everybody knew at the time, at least, as ALS. And this is on July 4th, 1939. He's been diagnosed that he has ALS. The year before, he had a mediocre year. Wasn't that great? Probably greater than most players, but wasn't living up to his particular standards. This season came around, spring training. He even passed out in spring training one time. And if you recall, earlier in the year, he took himself out of the lineup. And he was the Iron Man before Cal Ripken Jr. Remember that? He had played all those games from his rookie year all the way over 2,000 games without missing a single game. And then he finally took himself out. His wife set up an appointment with Mayo Clinic to find out what was wrong with him because he couldn't field balls that he had been fielding for years. He could hit the ball, but it wouldn't go very far. And so that he knew something was wrong. And so before 60,000 fans at Yankee Stadium, recognizing and realizing there's no treatment for this particular disease that he had, he gave this speech with a lot more emotion than I'm going to be able to give it. If you want to watch it online, you're welcome to watch it online. But this is what he says. Fans, for the past 2 weeks, you have been reading about a bad break that I got. Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I have been in ballparks for 17 years and have never received anything but kindness and encouragement from you fans. When you look around, wouldn't you consider it a privilege to associate with such a fine-looking group of men as the group of men standing in uniform at this ballpark today, pointing over to all of his Yankee teammates? Sure, I'm lucky. Who wouldn't consider it an honor to have known Jacob Rupert, also the builder of baseball's greatest empire, Ed Barrow, to have spent 6 years with that wonderful little fellow, Miller Huggins, then to have spent the next 9 years with that outstanding leader, that smart student of psychology, the best manager in baseball, Joe McCarthy? Sure, I'm lucky. When the New York Giants, a team that you would give your right arm to beat and vice versa, sends you a gift, that's something. When everybody down to the groundskeepers and those boys in white coats remember you with trophies, that's something. The boys in white coats were the doctors that were treating them. When you have a wonderful mother-in-law who takes sides with you and squabbles with her own daughter, that's something. Some of you may have experienced that. I see some people looking at each other. When you have a father and a mother who work all their lives so you can have an education and build your body, it's a blessing. When you have a wife who is that's the finest I know. So I close in saying that I might have been given a bad break, but I have an awful lot to live for. All of us will feel the same way when we're getting ready to pass from this life to go to the next. We will not judge the quality of our life based upon any of our credentials. You know, Lou Gehrig is known as one of the top 10 baseball players of all time. He won the Triple Crown, which is a feat that hasn't been accomplished since Ted Yastrzemski did it, I think. Carter Yastrzemski. So it's a huge accomplishment that he had. He had like 100 RBIs in 1 year. This guy was phenomenal. And yet, when he's giving a speech and has all these people listening to him, he doesn't define his life based upon, I accomplished this, and I accomplished this, and I won 6 World Series, and I was on so many all-star teams, and I had so many hits, and so many RBIs, and so many runs. What does he use to judge the quality of his life? It was the strength of the relationships that he had in this life. And you noted, he noted the owner of the team, and he noted a couple general managers, and he noted his relationship with coaches. He noted his relationship with fellow players and how important that was to him. He noted the relationship with the fans, his mother-in-law, his mom and dad. That's what's important in life. And so that's why it's important for us to open up God's book. This is the most practical book ever given to mankind. And so we can open up this book and find out what you and I can start doing right now in our life. So that as we develop and go through our life, and when we do reach the end of our life, we're surrounded by love. We're surrounded by people who care about us, and that we have these strong relationships. And for us as Christians, we know that the people in this room, this is the best pool of real friends that we could ever look for. The world has friends, but we have deep connection, because something about us is that we are connected by being friends with Jesus and being people who have been washed in the blood and people who have a relationship. We have the same Father, and so we are brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we are going to be the ones that help one another out through these very difficult times. It's a joy for me to be here. Been looking forward for this for a couple years now. I mean, when Bill called me, it was several years ago. It was 2025. That's forever away, and before you know it, it sneaks up on you. But I'm glad to be here. I think the last time I was here was 2013, so it's been a few minutes since I was here last. So hopefully the things that we have to share for you today will be very helpful as we go through. Again, the outlines. The outlines are there because I want you to have the notes. So if you ever want to go back and say, what was that verse he talked about? What was that point he made? What was the practical application that we could apply to our lives? You can go back and look at that, and you have it readily available to you. I hope that is helpful to you. So today's lesson is going to be dealing with being a real friend. And there's 4 points we're going to talk about in this Bible class time period. Is one, you must share real feelings. 2, you must respect real wishes. 3, you must make real sacrifices. And 4, you must offer real encouragement. Proverbs 18:24 talks about a man who has friends has to do what? First, show himself to be friendly. So that's what we're talking about. How can you and I show ourselves to be friendly? Sometimes we look around and we think, why don't I have good relationships? Why don't I have a lot of solid friendships? And it might be because you haven't stepped out of your comfort zone and went around trying to be a good friend first. And you'll find out, if you go try to be a good friend to a bunch of people, you'll have a lot of good friends in return. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and look at our first point. You must share real feelings. We're pretty good at blocking ourselves off, building walls around ourselves, and not opening ourselves up to too many people. And there's reason for that. And I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form you go share all your real feelings with everybody you meet. It's the close friendships that you have in life, the people that are in this room, that you can sort of take those barriers down. Be your real self. Share your real feelings, your good points, your bad points, your weaknesses, your struggles, your successes. John chapter 15 and verse 15 says this, Jesus speaking to his disciples, "No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." So the relationship between Jesus and his apostles, it grew to the point where Jesus could call them, "You are my friends. I no longer call you my servants. Now I have called you my friends." It grew in that. At first, you're my servants. You don't know me very well. I haven't developed a relationship with you yet. Eventually, as we get closer, we go from having a relationship where I characterize you as my servants to a relationship where I can characterize you as my friend. And in this particular text, Jesus says to his apostles, everything that God wants me to share to you, I have shared with you. I've opened up my heart to you. I've told you everything that you need to know so that you can be ready to do the next thing that comes. Open and honest communication is a sign of real friendship. We don't hide things from our close friends. We know that and this is a great feeling, we know that our closest friends can know everything about us, including our warts, including all the things that aren't perfect about us, and they're still going to love us. And so we can be open about that and discuss those type of things with them. In Matthew chapter 16 and verse 21, it says, "From that time Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and be raised on the third day." Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but of the things of men. So even though the apostles weren't ready to know all this truth, Jesus knew that they needed to know it. And so he opened up and told them, what's about to happen to me is going to be really, really bad. I am going to be turned over to the Jewish leaders. They're going to turn me over to the Romans. I'm going to be killed. It's going to be very, very painful. And going into this, you need to know what's going on so that you can be ready to help me in that moment, or you can be ready to help me after that moment. Now, another point here. So Jesus is, this is bad. This is what's going to happen to me. And I think sometimes we're too guarded in sharing bad things that are happening to us. We want to project an image to everyone else that, you know what, I don't go through bad things. I'm above bad things. My life is wonderful and great. And we're robbing ourselves of that help that we can get from our friends when we are going through bad things. We need to be honest and open in our communication with our closest friends. And Jesus, in this moment, did not hesitate. You see this, what happens here. Peter was close to Jesus. And so in Jesus, and this is from our perspective, you're like, Peter, man, what in the world are you doing? I mean, this is Jesus you're talking about. Peter is learning who Jesus is still. He's a friend to Peter. Peter's a friend. So he goes, Jesus, this is never going to happen to you. So he expresses what he thinks about this. And Jesus isn't shy in expressing to Peter his anger and says, Get behind me, Satan. There's a proverb that says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Sometimes we need our friends to tell us, hey, you know what? You're not acting like a Christian right now. You're more acting like your father is the devil. Now, if that is a solid friendship going into it, that friendship's going to handle that. And you're going to know how directly you can communicate that to that person. But some of us need, at times, very direct communication because we're not very bright. I don't know. You guys might all be real bright, but sometimes I just need someone to tell me how it really is, and not what they think I want to hear. Just be honest, and that is exactly what Peter did, or Jesus did with Peter. Look at Matthew chapter 17 and verse 14 in your outline. Matthew chapter 17 and verse 14 says this: And when they had come to the multitude, a man came to him, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers severely. For he often falls into the fire and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Jesus would often rebuke his disciples for their lack of faith. It's interesting, in the Bible you have multiple times him telling his apostles, you don't have enough faith. I need you to have more faith. This isn't going to work unless your faith grows. Where he would look at Gentiles often, people who weren't from God's children at that particular time, and he would say, I marvel at their faith. And sort of showing this idea that they needed to have more faith. And I'll be honest with you. And I'm looking out at this crowd today, and I know some of you well, I know some of you not very well, some of you I don't know very well at all, or haven't met you yet. But I can almost guarantee you this, every single one of us has had issues with our faith at some point in our life. We're like, what in the world's going on here? I don't know what's happening. And some of us have probably even wanted to throw in the towel at time or two and say, you know what, I don't even think this is worth it. This is tough. And what we need from one another is we need someone to look us in the eye and say, you know what? You're not living like you have much faith right now. You need to believe in God, and you need to believe His promises, and you need to do what God wants you to do. In John chapter 15, verse 9, it says, And the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So Jesus, we're talking about sharing real feelings. Real friends share real feelings. And so here we have an occasion where Jesus did not shy away about telling his disciples, other men, I love you. And I did. I was teasing yesterday. For those of you who don't know, Tom and I went and helped move the Daryl and his wife into their new house, and nobody knew who I was. It was sort of funny because, like, who are you? And, somebody believed I was a member here that always sat in the back. I always sat in the back. It's like I sat up front, and he must be a new member that always sits in the back. I don't know where he came from. And I was teasing with Daryl at the very end. I was telling somebody that moving is really a preacher doing an intelligence test on all the congregation. Who lifts things properly, who moves things properly, and all this good stuff. And at that, in that moment, it was a little bit early when we were leaving the storage unit for the last time. Daryl hugged everybody and thanked everybody for helping him. And when he came over here to Tom, Tom said, "I love you, brother." And that's important. And that love is going to grow stronger over time. And that's what God anticipates. I take it you guys haven't known each other for a long time. So the few months that you've been here, you've known each other. But because of our relationship through Jesus, and because we're all disciples of Jesus and God is our Father, it's an automatic friendship and an automatic love that we'll talk about the emotional love bank a little bit later, but it's like Jesus makes the initial deposit. So all of our love banks are full with the love for one another because of what Jesus did in dying on the cross. So two brothers who haven't known each other but for a few months can hug each other as men and say, "I love you, brother." I think that's very, very important because true friends can say, "I love you." And true friends can express their true feelings towards one another. In Matthew chapter 26 and verse 37, speaking of Jesus, says, "He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, 'My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me.'" So, an important point here. So, real friends share real pain. They don't cover it up. I think that's important. When we're going through something, sometimes we want to bottle it all up, man up, woman up, whatever it is, and think that I don't need to let people know how much I'm suffering. Sometimes we do. We have to share our real pain with people. How are people going to weep with those who weep if we never share our pain with them? How are they going to rejoice with those who rejoice if we never share our joy with them? So there's this open communication, sharing real emotions, sharing real feelings, that is sort of at the foundation of having true friendships. Now, I think there is an important point to note here. There are levels of friendships, and that's okay. Jesus had levels of friendships, right? He had his apostles, but then he had these three that he was closer to. Here we have Peter, James, and John. The rest of the apostles didn't hear the emotion that Jesus expressed on this particular occasion because that was reserved for those three. So sometimes as Christians, we feel like we have to have that close, intimate sharing with everybody, and that's not even what Jesus experienced. Sometimes we just need one or two or three friends who we can share everything with. And that is an important aspect of it. So never feel guilty that, hey, you know what? There's this group that I feel really comfortable sharing things with, and then another group that I love, but I don't feel as comfortable sharing this certain information with. That's okay. We all need those people, though, that we can open up and share our information with. So that's our first point. If we want to be a real friend, we have to be able to express real emotions to one another and be honest with those. Second, we must respect real wishes. Now, this is sort of an interesting one here because this is Jesus speaking. In John chapter 15 and verse 14, "You are my friends if you do whatever I command you." That's probably not going to work with us, all right? You're not my friend if you do whatever I tell you to do. I'm not looking for friends like that, so sorry. But this is Jesus. So Jesus' friendship with his followers, it was unique because he was the Son of God. Our friendship, we must mutually respect one another's wishes. And I think that's an important thing as well. Because sometimes our friends might communicate something to us, and we might think we know better than them. But if they communicate, these are my boundaries, this is what I need right now, then that's what we should provide for them. Provide what they've asked for, provide what they need, not necessarily what we would need in that particular situation. So we're going to read 2 Samuel chapter 15 in just a second. I know you guys are studying from the life of David. I don't know if you've gotten this far yet. But we're going to see David had the capacity to have very strong friendships and build loyalty with people. We know about the story with Jonathan. There's another story that's not quite as talked about when it talks about David's level of friendships. This all started several years ago. You remember Amnon committed a sin with his half-sister. And his brother, Joab, wanted to kill him. But his brother, Joab, waited 2 years to try to bide his time. He told his sister, Tamar, don't do anything right now. He is your brother. Come live at my house. I'm going to take care of this later. David seems to not take care of it the way that he should. All right, he's sort of passive here. We see sort of his passive side of his personality coming out here. And then Joab has this feast, and he wants to invite all the brothers over. And David says, no, that's way too much work. You don't need to invite me. I'm not coming. Don't invite all your brothers. And then Joab says, what about Amnon? Can he come? And you would think that David should have clicked in David's head, knowing the animosity they had, and David should have said, why Amnon? But he doesn't seem to do that. So Amnon goes there, and Amnon is killed by Joab's servant. Well, after that, Joab goes into hiding for 3 years. And then Absalom goes into hiding for 3 years. Thank you. Absalom goes into hiding for 3 years. And Joab is the one that brings him back by having the woman of Tekoa tell a very interesting story. And then David says, did Joab put you up to this? And he says, yeah, Joab put me up to this. And so he let him come back. But even when he comes back, 2 years, he didn't even see the king. And then finally, he burns Joab's field. And so he finally gets a meeting with David. They hug and they kiss and they have all this grieving. But then Absalom, for the next 4 years, sort of is laying the groundwork to overthrow David. Remember, the people will come and want to hear from David, and he'll be out there, yeah, the line's too long, you can't get in today, but if you would just tell me your problems, I could solve them. And so everybody loved Absalom, so he was setting the groundwork. So now where we are is David is fleeing Jerusalem, his son is coming into Jerusalem, and David, as you'll see in your study of David, he is a man of faith, but he's also very strategic. He's thinking and doing his part all along. David has spy networks. He has all this very deep, sophisticated way of getting communication to people. And this is one thing that he comes up with. So 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 32. Now it happened with David and come to the top of the mountain where he worshiped God. If you just pause there for a second, he's leaving because his son is trying to throw him over. He gets to the top of the mountain and he worships God. That says a lot about David. He's an incredible, we have the Hall of Fame of faith. We noted in Hebrews chapter 11 a lot of times. If there was a Hall of Fame of worshipers, David would be in that list for sure. There was Hushai coming to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. Verse 33, David said to him, if you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously. So I will now also be your servant, then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. This is right after he finds Ahithophel has joined Absalom. Verse 35, and do you not have Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, who are with you? Therefore, it will be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell to Zadok and Abiathar, the priest. Indeed, they have with them their 2 sons, and then they will tell their 2 sons, and their 2 sons will send it to me. Verse 37. So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. So what does Hushai want to do? We're talking about respecting real wishes. What does Hushai want to do? He wants to go with David. His heart is with David. But David doesn't want him to do that. That's not my wish. Right now, what I need from you is I need you to go spy out against Absalom. So Hushai was not only one of his servants, but it noted here in verse 37, he was a friend of David. So as a friend of David, David says, if you come with me, you're sort of going to be a burden to me. But the way that you can really help me out, what I really need from you right now, is I need you to go back, tell Absalom you're going to be his servant. Whatever Ahithophel says, because the advice of Ahithophel was like the advice of God. I mean, everybody was like, everything he says comes true. He's brilliant. Say whatever he does. Say the opposite of what that guy says. I mean, that's your strategy here, okay? Listen to what he has to say, and then immediately say the opposite. And if you say the opposite, if you can convince them to do the opposite of Ahithophel, then I will have success here. So he didn't treat him like he wanted to. He treated him like David wanted him to. I think that's important. We must respect one another's real wishes. In 2 Samuel chapter 16 and verse 15. It says, "Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with them. And so it was, when Hushai, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, 'Long live the king! Long live the king!' So Absalom said to Hushai, 'Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?'" So this whole situation here is this principle of doing what your friend requests because your friend knows what he needs better than you know what they need. And so he does this, and Absalom takes him in, and you recall the story. What happens? Ahithophel gives advice, let's go after him right now. As a matter of fact, if we chase him down right now, I'll be the one to kill him. And then the advice comes back. Hushai says, no, let's just wait a while. And waiting a while, they get the message to David. David knows he has time to go away. Absalom recognized that Hushai was David's friend, and he reviews him. Friends should show loyalty. And we're going to have a lesson on loyalty. I think it's Thursday night, how friends are loyal to one another. And that's what loyalty looked like through a lens that was not a godly lens. Real loyalty was do what I need. Hushai encourages Absalom not to follow Ahithophel's good advice, and Hushai's advice led to Ahithophel's suicide and Absalom's death and David's redemption in Israel. David got to come back. Our third point. What time do we end class? 10, 15, 10 o'clock? 10:15, thank you. All right. So the third point we're going to talk about is you must make real sacrifices. If you're going to be a real friend, you're going to have to make sacrifices for your friends. There's no way around it. There's going to be times where your friend's going to need something, and you don't want to do it. But your love and your friendship's going to override that, and you are going to do it. And so John chapter 15, verse 13, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." So Jesus showed the greatest level of sacrifice by giving his life for us. Now John, who wrote both of these passages, 1 John chapter 3, verse 16, the disciple that Jesus loved, says this, "By this we know love, because he laid down his life for us, and we also ought to lay down our lives for our brethren. But whoever has this world's goods and see his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him?" You and I should follow Jesus' example by being willing to lay down our life for our friends, for our brothers and sisters in Christ. Now, most of us, it may happen rarely, but most of us aren't going to be called to actually die for our brothers and sisters. But we are going to be called to live for them and do things for them on a regular basis. And in this particular passage, it says laying down our lives at least includes sharing our earthly possessions with them. And it's an amazing, you read the whole story of the New Testament, starting in the book of Acts, you start seeing that they had this amazing ability, amazing desire to fulfill this particular instruction of Jesus. If one person lacked, someone else would make up for that, and they would provide what the people needed. And that's what we should be willing to do. There's an example of this in the Old Testament of how real love, real friendship requires real sacrifice. It's the story of Abraham. It's in your notes in Genesis chapter 13 and verse 8. This is where they're having so much problems because they're so wealthy. We call it first world problems today. I mean, they were sort of like, we have so much, you have so much. Now we're fighting over how much we have. How are we going to solve this? And you could just sort of visualize this in your head. Lot's descendants, Lot's servants see this great pasture land over here, and they want to get Lot's cattle and sheep to that pasture land because it's the best. And they're sort of blocking Abraham's servants from getting to that land. And so they get to that area, and we got here first. We're going to get the best land. And so Abraham sees this. Lot sees this. And they realize, hey, we can't have this fight. We cannot have this happening. So in Genesis chapter 13, verse 8, "So Abram said to Lot, 'Please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left.' Abraham sacrificed the best of the land for his nephew Lot. And let's think about this for a second. As Christians, as believers, as people who have a relationship with God, we have huge advantages. Because who's taking care of us ultimately? God is. Does Abraham know about some promises? Does Abraham have confidence in those promises? And that's one reason why Abraham could say, you know what? Wherever you want to go, I'll go the other way. Why? Because I know God's going to help me there. And so if we're having strife between brothers, and this where we're having too many things in this particular occasion, look, it doesn't matter to me. You pick. You go where you went. And from some earthly standpoint, he was making a great sacrifice here by giving Lot the best territory. Because he knew who God was and that God was going to protect him, he knew that God was going to take care of him because of this. And we're not going to read Judges chapter 11, 37 through 39. I want to make this point, though. Jephthah's daughter comes out, and he tells her the commitment he had made to God. And what was her request? Let me and my friends go mourn my virginity. You know how long they mourned for? 2 months. One of the most precious possessions that we have, and what we're oftentimes the most protective of, is not our finances. Sometimes it's easy to give somebody a little bit of money. It's harder to give them time. And so these friends on this particular occasion gave up 2 months of their life to go with their friend and to mourn her virginity about this. So we need to help people, and we need to spend time helping people. Now I have down here, and I had this down in my notes before yesterday. There's no one in their right mind who would help another person move stuff unless they really love them or really love God. I'm telling you, right? No one would ever say, hey, how about coming to my house and lifting up a bunch of heavy boxes and furniture, putting it in a truck and taking it somewhere and unloading it? It's not happening. But for those of you who did this, you spent not only money. For some of you, spent money to provide food for those who were moving. That's very generous. That shows a solid friendship that you are already developing here in just a few months. Because we're friends with Jesus first. That's why this is happening, right? That's the basis of all this. Some of you spent hours, not just yesterday, but the day before, unloading and loading trucks in order to help this happen. So time is something we need to be willing to sacrifice for one another. And even when it's difficult for us, even when there might be something better. I had a friend, and he's still a really good friend of mine in Columbus, Indiana. Whenever there was like a real good ball game I wanted to watch on or something like that, he would call me, like right before the game. And he'd say, yeah, man, Lori and I are having some problems. And we need to talk to you. We need to come over. Or we need some marriage advice or marriage counseling. And he would always just do it just to find out what I would say, what I would do. And then he would start, no, we're doing fine. I just knew the game was getting ready to go. This particular occasion. So our last point here is Jesus, you must offer real encouragement. John chapter 15, I think this is very powerful. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, that you love one another. Jesus encouraged the apostles by telling them that they were going to bear long-lasting fruit. Has anybody ever told you something? What you are doing is going to make a difference. That's huge. I mean, that's a situation where it gives you an extra step, leap in your step, some extra pep in your step, because somebody has had that for you. Jesus told them that they were going to make a real difference that impacted history. Offering words of encouragement is very, very important. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 9 says this: 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if one fall, the companion will lift him up. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. When we fall, we need friends who will encourage us to get up and will help us get up. That's what we need in this life. And this Ecclesiastes chapter 4 talks about just how bad it is to be alone. Here's the blessing. There's not a single person in this building that ever has to be alone. You have people in this building that will be with you to the end. And they will hold your hand until you take your last breath. God has arranged it so that we never have to be alone. In Acts chapter 15, in verse 36, it says, Then after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, Let us now go back and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word to them and see how they are doing. Now Barnabas was determined to take with him John Mark, but Paul insisted that they should not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another, and so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brethren to the grace of God, and he went through Syria and Cilicia strengthening the churches. The apostles gave Barnabas his name, and his name means son of encouragement. What could Barnabas have done on this particular occasion? Paul's right. You did forsake us. And, all the fame, all the glory, all the good stuff's going to be with Paul. And so, Paul's my guy. I mean, I'm sorry, John Mark. He's the guy. But no, he knew that this is a young man that needed to be encouraged. And the best way he could encourage him is by taking him along with him. Sometimes we encourage people by working with them. That's how we encourage them. So here's some practical application. I don't think I have a slide for this, but it is in your notes. Set aside some time this week to start building closer relationships. I think there's a couple group activities already planned this week. If you can go to those, go to those. Relationships are built in this building, but they get a lot deeper when we spend time outside this building together. There's just no doubt about that. There's only so much, and when we come together to worship, so deep these relationships get. It's the times where we're in one another's houses, where we're sitting around the table together, talking and discussing things, where we're just shooting the breeze outside around a campfire. Those are the times where we get deeper in our relationships. So if those opportunities are here, I want to encourage everyone to take part in those. And those of you who desire, start. I know that you do this already, but just make some, is that my 5-minute warning? All right. Just make some extra effort to spend more time with one another. I mean, some of my greatest memories as a kid are spending time with my fellow Christian friends. Make a concerted effort to break down the walls that you've been building up for the years. Whatever. If you're hurting, find somebody in this room that you can tell you're hurting to, and share that with them. Let them just, cry with you for a while, hug you for a while, whatever you need. And if you're excited about something, tell them that. I got something good happen to me. Share that feeling with them so they can rejoice with you. And then, this is sort of going to be one of our underlying themes. Look out from this group and start noticing people who do good things and people who have potential. We'll talk about that next. And encouraging them along those routes. We need encouraging words. This congregation needs to be the most encouraging congregation the world has ever seen. I mean, when we walk in those doors open up, you're coming to a group of people who love you and will encourage you. And so this is just our first lesson in how to build authentic relationships. And we've noted already, we must share real feelings with one another. I'm going to say, I love you, brother. And I love that idea of calling one another brother. I think there's a power in that. It really shows us how our connection is. We must respect one another's wishes. We must be willing to make real sacrifices, financially, time, whatever the case may be. And we must offer real encouragement to one another. And with that, that's all I have to say. And for a few minutes, and then I'll have a lot more to say.